Hi everyone, I'm Brittany Crisantos, and this is another mental health conversation with me. As many of you know, I'm deeply committed to helping and end the mental health crisis. And a big part of that crisis and that mission of mine is opening up conversations about mental health. And today we're tackling a topic that doesn't always get the attention it deserves. It's about the relationship between our finances and our mental health. It's no secret that financial stress can be overwhelming, and unfortunately, financial hardship is one of the leading causes to suicide among adults. So I'm really excited to dive into this topic, and I'm so thrilled to have today's guest, Franklin Asani, an expert in financial management, which all leads to our mental health. Franklin is a private banker, author, entrepreneur, and he teaches financial literacy through his social media. His work is truly inspiring in helping so many individuals not only improve their financial situation, but also reduce the mental health stress that comes with financial strain. So, Franklin's, I'm so grateful that you're here, and I'm excited that we get to dive into this and to raise awareness today.
Thank you so much for having me. I think it's a very important conversation, and I'm really pleased that you're enabling the platform for people to be able to tune into discussions like this, and hopefully, we can share some insight today that people can, apply to their circumstances, or if nothing else, just have a perspective of how, money and finance impacts people's daily lives.
I totally agree with you. And so I'm like a total nerd and I love reading articles and stats and stuff like that. Like that's what I'll do on a Saturday night tonight. Probably I won't go out. So I recently I recently learned a startling statistic that sparked inspiration for today. And it's people with depression and problem debt are 4 to 2 times more likely to still have depression 18 months later than people without financial difficulty. And then the most like stat that I saw that really sparked inspiration and made me realize, holy crap, there is a crisis out there, is people in problem debt are 3 times as likely to have thought about suicide in the past year. Do you think finances have a strong impact on our mental health?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I think that they are really shocking statistics, but unfortunately, I do recognize that there is truth in it. I think finances definitely do impact mental well-being, because whether we like it or not, whilst money doesn't buy you happiness, some will say, it definitely offers you security. And so without the security, people do then start to, panic, worry, overthink, and they feel insecure. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there are some basic fundamentals that we all need to survive when it comes to food, when it comes to safety, shelter. And sometimes when people haven't got the financial resources, even those basic needs are compromised. And so I think sometimes when we think about, people's want for money and financial security, it isn't always to do with, being able to buy a mansion or a Ferrari. Sometimes it's simply being able to put food on the table, to be able to travel from A to B, and to be able to provide for the people who are closest to you, whether you've got children, elderly parents, or vulnerable people around you. If you haven't got the financial security to be able to do those things, then it does play on your mind. And I think absolutely that's why there is such a direct correlation between mental well-being and your finances.
That makes sense because I feel like sometimes people have this like end goal. They want that mansion, the beautiful cars, the nice clothes. But at the end of the day, there's people that don't have the financial things to have the basic needs, like you said, like
Yeah.
food, shelter, clothes. And those are the people that are at risk the most. The people that
Mm.
can't afford food for their kids, that can't afford clothes or diapers for their babies. And I think that is, the single moms, the people living in poverty or the people not able to afford those basic needs, those are the ones that are at risk.
Mm.
And what you said there was really, really empowering. There is that, there's a difference kind of there. And so, what I'm curious about is how you came along your journey of finances and wealth management. Like, how did you discover, hey, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to do to teach people and empower them? I want to know more about Franklin.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to say that there was a strategic kind of plan from when I was young to say that I was going to become a private banker or work within wealth management, but that wouldn't be true. I think I stumbled across it completely coincidentally, actually. And now when I look back, I think that was probably a blessing in disguise because I didn't overthink it. This was during 2008, in the financial crisis, the global financial crisis. where banks and financial institutions all across the world were in some trouble. And it was that year when I was sort of in my final term of university, when I was thinking about career options when I graduate. I
Hmm.
remember at the time that a lot of people who I knew were graduating ahead of me and not being able to find the jobs they wanted. So I could sense that there was something in the economy or in the markets that meant that I had to start thinking wider and outside the box. So it was pretty much a case of, slotting myself wherever they would take me, really, quite frankly, because I could sense that it wasn't a time to be picky. But I just remember that when I was at school, when I was a bit younger, there was an individual who worked for a bank, as a sort of customer service representative in a branch. And of all the people that I knew around me at the time, that was the only person who had a job that didn't involve sort of retail work. So, working in a shoe store, clothes store, a toy store. And when I was growing up, I worked at Toys R Us, selling PlayStations and Nintendo Wii. So when I was thinking about work and a job, I thought, despite studying communications and media at university, I thought, what job can I think about that could maybe offer me some immediate stability that is also respectable? So I completely diverted from what I was being trained to do at university and thought, let me try banking. So it was sort of a split moment decision, and that sort of set me down a rabbit hole of really investigating and understanding what the banking industry entails. And despite the fact that people were being fired left, right, center because of the financial crisis, they were still hiring in some places. So in my mind, I thought, right, well, if I can get into banking and be part of that rebuild, then I might be able to really build a really good career here. And 16 years later, I'm still in banking and I haven't looked back.
Wow, that's amazing. I love those little moments in life and like you just don't know what you're doing, but then
Yeah.
something comes along and then you find your purpose or your calling. I feel kind of similar to you with that because obviously I don't know how I got here, but I got here somehow, right? And
Yeah.
if it wasn't for me writing a book when I was 15 years old about my mental health struggles, then I wouldn't even probably be talking to you today.
Mm.
Um, so definitely things like that in life happen and it's really interesting when it clicks, and I think those opportunities are the ones where you have to really think and be like, I'm going to do this, take a chance and just do it, because you never know where your path is going to lead, right?
Exactly. And I'm a big believer in that, in terms of being able to, when a door opens, walk through it. What's the worst that can happen? You learn, you explore, you find out new things about yourself. And that's pretty much what I did. So, yeah, very firm believer in taking opportunity and making the most of it.
I like that. Even if you fail or it's not the right path, then that path will lead you to the next path. And
Yeah.
I do like that. It's funny you say that because I totally live like that every day.
Mm,
I'm the type of person that's like, what new? What else can come to me? Like, just really having open mindset of,
mm.
okay, I'm on this path and I'm open to any opportunities and I'm literally open to anything. So I love that you think like that too. What I'm also curious about is, have you ever had any setbacks in your career or any personal moments in your life where you struggled with mental health personally? Career, personal, anything in your life that you can share some awareness or some experiences with?
Yeah, I mean, I think, we talk a lot about, sort of fitness, health, but, mental health or mental well-being hasn't always been something that has been publicly endorsed, quite frankly. I think even for me being in the workplace over the last 16 years, I
Mhm.
can already notice the difference in terms of how much time we now dedicate to making sure that people's well-being and mental health is in good shape. And that's only because of society being able to allow that conversation and things like this, really making people aware that it's okay to talk about, the state of your mental health. But I guess for me, I during my career, there's been moments where, you put a lot of pressure on yourself to achieve things. If you are a driven individual, self-motivated, sometimes you don't quite know when enough is enough. And there's a bit of an anxiety that comes with that. It's, firstly, I get my foot through the door in this organization, I climb the ladder, I become a bit senior, I get more senior, and then you think, what's next for me to achieve? And so, I go off and write a book and I do something different, and you're always kind of chasing and climbing. So, and this is something that I think I'm still figuring out, in terms of allowing yourself to really just exist and be present and do what you can do and control the things you can control and not to be consumed by the things you can't control. It's an ongoing thing. But, for me, I would say it's been incremental things at different stages of my journey where, you know, I've tried to do something, maybe it hasn't worked out quite as well as I thought it would, and not allowing that to sort of shape who I am, particularly when you think about entrepreneurship. Most of the successful entrepreneurs we know today have all failed. They've all tried something that hasn't worked, which, they could have given up at that point, but they didn't, and they carried on and they persevered. And I've had some of those moments, in my career so far where, I've tried to kind of do a few things here and there that haven't worked. And it's really always just trying to center myself back in terms of, like I said, focus on the things that I can control. But also, partly the challenge for me has been about being aware of my influence and the responsibility that I have, given I'm in a position where I know I can offer a perspective and give something back to people. And sometimes I do grapple with that because am I doing enough, in order to really sort of put the ladder down and help other people to be able to find their feet. And so sometimes, even in my moments of quiet, I think, should I be on Instagram posting something inspirational? Should I be recording a video to talk about something different? Because there's almost this guilt that if you've got it and others don't, how do you make sure you're giving that back to people? And so that is something that, I'm constantly challenging myself on, saying, am I doing enough? And so, yeah, that's kind of, my experiences are really just always making sure that I don't beat myself up about it, because, there's only one of me. And as much as I'd like to be here and there and everywhere, sometimes I do have to remind myself that,
You're
I'm probably more useful. Yeah, exactly. I'm human, but I'm probably more useful when I'm taking care of myself and doing maybe fewer but more meaningful things.
It's so funny because I'm exactly the same way. I mean, I feel all the time I have this huge responsibility. I always want to make a difference. I always want to help people, and then I'm here like, how am I helping myself, right? And it's funny because I'm every day I'm like thinking, I'm messaging my agent. What else can I do? What else can I do? What should I post today? What do I do? Do I need to do more? And she's always telling me, stop. Like,
Yeah,
just go to yoga. Literally, she goes, go to yoga today, because at the end of the day, if we can't help ourselves, then how can we
yeah,
help others? And being that also, I feel that I'm in an industry or a career choice where people's lives are vulnerable, and I feel my personally that if I don't help this person, or I don't do this talk, or I don't do that, then I won't make a difference. And I feel this
yeah,
responsibility. And I actually always take it to bed with me every night, where I think, what can I do more? Or how can I make more of a difference? And I think, and I cry sometimes at night, because I'm thinking, what more can I do? I'm almost 30, and I feel like I need to do more. And then I'm dealing with personal situations and all this stuff,
yeah,
and show that, obviously, because we show our business side, or that side. But I think it's about vulnerability and being open with people and realizing, hey, I'm human. Like, I struggle. That was a terrible heartbreak. That was a terrible breakup. I'm good though. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's funny that we say that, because I always feel that way too. So I'm glad you shared that, because you are human. And
yeah,
being that you're human, we go through ups and downs, and then you feel this responsibility to make more of a difference. So, yeah.
absolutely.
And so, okay, my next question is, since you've been in the wealth management for, you said, over 16 years now,
Hmm.
um, advising high net profile individuals, from your experience, have you ever seen a connection between financial stress and mental health issues with the clients you do have that maybe have significant of wealth?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's also the other misconception that I like to often remind people about, that more money doesn't necessarily eradicate all your problems. So as I said at the start, there is a basic human need for security and comfort. Anything above and beyond that starts to become more around self-fulfillment. So, money can only buy you so many homes, but you can only live in so many at once. You can only drive so many cars at once. You can only have so many watches on your wrist at once, or handbags at once. So once you've got the basic needs fulfilled, everything else becomes around self-actualization and self-fulfillment. And so that's where you start seeing that actually the problems that everybody else have still exist, even when you have a lot more money. So it'll be simple things like, when you're somebody with a lot of wealth, how does that impact your friends and family around you? Because they don't always they're not always aware, of how much wealth you have. Particularly some of the people I work with, and that can also be a very lonely space to exist in, because the means you've got. You can see people around you maybe struggling financially, or finding it difficult to get the right careers or their businesses and doing so well, but you can't be the one to save everyone. And so sometimes people I work with have this kind of burden of, again, do I give my resources to other people? But actually, if I do that, then that impacts me. So it's this balance of how much can I tell people that I'm worth, or how much can I really tell people that I've got? Because aside from the Forbes list telling everybody how much celebrities are worth, there are actually people who like to operate behind the scenes and don't necessarily want to disclose their net worth or how much they're worth to other people. But aside from that kind of societal challenge of how they see themselves, you've also got even things like the personal family dynamics. So if you're the successful one in your family and you've got siblings and parents and cousins and aunties who aren't so wealthy and they know that you've got the means, how does that dynamic change? Are they coming to you often to ask for loans or money or for investment and things like that? And you can't say yes to everything. So does that then change your relationship with the family members? When you buy somebody a Christmas present and they know you've got millions in the bank, do they start questioning, oh, they only got me pajamas for Christmas, but I know they're driving a Ferrari? And so you're aware that everyone's constantly critiquing your choices, your actions, and your decision making because they think, oh, should they be doing more for me because I know they can? And in your mind, you're trying to maintain and manage what you have. So there's also that immediate family dynamic. And even simple things like, how much do you tell your children about the money you've got in the family? Because you still want them to have ethics and morals and dedication and hard work. You don't want your children or offspring to think that, oh, mommy and daddy are rich and therefore I don't need to learn at school. I don't need to go to work. And so again, trying to make sure that you give them a good level of living, but that doesn't become their undoing because they don't then become self-motivated is also a burden that people have. So at every level and every stage, the money only intensifies some of these problems, albeit it does get rid of some of your basic needs and essentials. So, okay, you can have a nice car, live in a nice house, wear nice clothes, go on nice holidays, but it still doesn't stop you from worrying about, is your daughter dating the right guy? Is your son dating the right, daughter? Partner. Whatever that dynamic is, it's still a problem for you, And so, then
Yeah.
the final thing, really, I would say, is about when you build a certain level of living or lifestyle that you become accustomed to, your biggest worry now is going backwards, right? And so sometimes they say it's better not to have anything at all than to have and then to lose it, because you know what it's like if you've made money to have the
Mhm.
nice cars, clothes, and houses. So you're worried now, thinking if anything happens, that means I have to downgrade my lifestyle. That's going to be a bad thing. So a lot of people are anxious, really just about maintaining the standard of living they create once they make money. So yes, in answer to your a very long answer to your question, but absolutely, and
I'm
it's
listening.
multifaceted.
No, that was a good answer. I'm learning right now. I'm thinking because I never thought of it like that. Because if you have money, then the thing you said before about the Christmas gifts, people expect more.
Yeah,
And then if you go from having so much money, and then somehow, God forbid, you lose your money, then that person is
yeah,
feeling the mental health strain and stress of, well, I can't afford my nice clothes, or I can't afford a family vacation now. Now I'm broke, and what do I do? So yeah, I'm listen. I like that answer because there's so many different levels to it, right?
yeah.
There's so many different situations that can happen with financial wealth and then mental health there. So my next question is, what about people who don't have financial wealth and are
Mm.
struggling with the burden of not being able to afford basic needs? Is there a way where people can take whatever money they can and save it, even if it's small amounts? I know I've seen online people take like $10 a day and they'll put in a little envelope. That's just something I saw.
Mm.
But is there something that people can do for saving their money, even if they don't have millions of dollars in the bank and they're making a basic salary?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, this is something that I talk about extensively in my book, in terms of understanding, the foundations or the fundamentals of financial literacy. So that all comes down to, the four pillars of how you spend money, saving money, investing money, and borrowing money. And those are the four pillars I talk about in the book. As really, if you can understand those four things, then you start to understand what financial literacy is. So for me, it's really about the principles and the practices you put in place right from the start, which is why I'm so keen that everybody in every household should really have a basic understanding of money. Because if you start when you were younger and you start making your first paycheck and you get into that discipline of being able to segregate your money, to know what you spend, what you save, what you invest, that's something you grow with, right? It becomes often much harder when you've built decades and decades of no discipline, and then you're now in a place where you have to start learning that. You've got commitments that sometimes make it very difficult. So, for example, in the book, I talk about a budget strategy that you can use to, look at how you segregate your income. The problem is if you haven't had that practice over the years, and your income now, 80% of it goes towards your living cost or your rent, there is nothing left really after that to be able to place in different buckets. But if you start out knowing how to segregate your money, as you're earning more money, you kind of live according to your means. And therefore, you know that actually, if my salary increases by $1,000 a month, because of my budgeting strategy, I'm not going to spend 800 on a new car, because I know that I'm putting 50 aside for this, 30 aside for this, 20 aside for that. And so you
Mhm.
kind of learn with that. So what I would say to people who don't have a lot of financial means at the moment is really do take it back to that basic fundamentals of understanding where your money is currently going. For me, I think visibility is the most important thing. I get shivers when I hear people say, oh, well, I'll use one bank account and everything just comes in and goes out of that same bank account. So, if as long as the card works at the till, then I'm okay. And I think, oh no, I couldn't live that way. As soon as I get paid any money, I move a certain amount to a different account where I pay all my bills from. So I know that when bills are due, there's never an issue of, oops, I actually spent it all at the restaurant last night, right? So it's even
Yeah.
those simple things and I automate that too, so that I don't forget to do it. Because sometimes people are like, oh yeah, I forgot to do it, and therefore I'm late paying my rent or late paying my bill this month. Every time I get paid, I move whatever I know is allocated for bills into an entirely separate account, and all my bills will be linked to that account. And I move whatever else I want to save to another account. And so it's just that discipline of knowing how to segregate your money, um,
Yeah.
and then being able to build from there. But I would say know where your money's going as a start, and
Know where you're.
understand, yeah, know where your money's going. Because if you can't see where your money's going, your money doesn't know what you're trying to achieve. And so it just disappears. So a lot of people get to the end of the month and like, I don't know where my money's going. It's just kind of disappearing out of the bank account. But I promise you, it doesn't walk by itself. You are putting it in places that is helping it to disappear from your bank account. So that visibility is very important, as a start. But then understanding how you then build the layers on top of it. Say, right, how much am I earning? If that's not enough to cover all my needs plus the additional things I want to do, how do I increase my income? Do I try and get more skills so I can get a promotion where I am? Or do I try and find another avenue where I can make some income on the side? Side hustles is a very popular thing now. So a lot of people use it as a means to add more money to what they earn every month. And so you now need to start thinking about how you can increase your income if what you're earning at the moment isn't sufficient. And you start building from there.
Wow, that's really insightful there because so many, I know people or I've known people that will make money and then
Mm.
spend it on a vacation, but then they have no money to buy coffee. And then they're like, well, can I have some money, Brittany? Or can I borrow some money? Can I have some money? I'm like, but that money you just made, you just spent it on a Miami trip
Yeah.
and you're buying all this jewelry, but you don't have money to buy food. How does that make sense? And you want to borrow money. So I understand, like, what you're saying there because some people just have one account and then like boom they spend it right away on their jewelry or fake stuff or whatever it is and people like to look apart but they
Yeah.
don't realize like people don't actually care about looking apart. People just like want you to live and have food and basic needs, and I think social media and this certain mentality that you have to, like, as a man maybe you have to look a certain way and you have to act a certain way to be accepted in society, and that means you need your gold chains and you need your all these vacations on Instagram and posting pictures in front of cars that are not even your cars. And people do this all the time and it makes me so mad because it's like no one cares about those cars. They care about you living and living a good life and owning a home and
Yeah.
bills to pay, and then you know what I mean. So I get what you're saying there, and I think that's really important for anyone listening to this because focus on you and your bills, and then those clothes and those Instagram posts in front of cars are maybe not even your car will come later, and maybe one day
Yeah.
you afford the car, right? Like,
I think it's probably stemmed from this societal thing around faking it till you make it, and it's worked for some people, and so sometimes that's why it's also difficult when you're trying to give guidance to individuals because oh well, that's kind of what they did and it worked for them. So people think I can spend my way into becoming wealthy because if I'm seeing at the right restaurants, right events, wearing the right clothes. Particularly now with social media, a big brand is just going to come and say, "Hey, we love your look, and we're going to give you lots of money to make you even more famous and more rich." And unfortunately, there's only a very small fraction of people who become that because of whatever program they've been on, or whatever they've done in the past. So it doesn't work for everybody. So it's far more important knowing that you are stable. When you turn your social media off and when you go to bed at night, it's far more important knowing that you've got the stability to put food
Mhm.
on the table, to pay your bills. Nothing else matters.
Exactly. And being able to afford coffee.
And coffee, if that's your thing.
So, okay, so you talk a lot about education,
Yeah.
and how do you think education plays a role in mental health, especially for those who might not have the formal access to education when it comes to money management?
Mhm.
You educate people on your Instagram, the Urban Financer. And so, for my question is, how does that education on money management have a big role on people's lives?
Yeah, well, look, I think education is so important. And if I had it my way, I would have financial literacy in the curriculum at in every country across the world, just to make sure that every human being has the information available to survive once they leave school. The reason why it's important is because when people don't know solutions to problems, it creates more anxiety, and that will ultimately find a way to start impacting their mental health and mental well-being. If you're trying to buy a home, but you don't know the right type of mortgage to take, or you don't know the right broker to speak to, or you haven't got the means to do it, that's anxiety. That's creating all these questions in your mind that you're trying to figure out. The problem with a lot of people nowadays is we're afraid to ask. It's almost assumed that we should know things, and therefore, if you're there trying to figure out something very important, we try to just research ourselves. And the truth is, there's so much information out there that sometimes that overload of information creates the anxiety. And so you try to do something genuine, like, right, what credit card do I need to find? And you go down this rabbit hole that a few hours later, you're now anxious that you've got information overload and you don't know which way to turn. And so really making sure that you can go somewhere that you can learn and understand the information. So in my book, again, I really talk about all the different types of financial products. I have a whole section which is dedicated to jargon busters, because I get that in the financial sector, there is a lot of jargon. APR, dividends, yields, equity, all these things that, if I'm in banking, I understand, but why should the normal person in the street understand those things when it's not the world they operate in, right? So, but once you can understand what it is, it no longer becomes kind of this consuming big monster. It's actually like, oh, okay. So when I'm looking at a credit card, that's what the APR means. So when I'm comparing, I actually have an understanding of what I'm looking for. Or if I've got an investment, the yield is what tells me how much income or gains I'm making on the back of that investment, so I can really make a calculated decision based on what type of investment I go for. So I think mental health is unfortunately becomes a consequence, or an issue for people when they are trying to navigate this really murky world of finance and wealth alone, and they don't understand, and they haven't got people to turn to that they can trust, and it becomes overwhelming because there's so much information out there. But trying to find something that really matches you is important, which is why I say when you're sick, you go to the doctor. When your
Yeah.
car's broken, you go to a mechanic. When you need something around money, talk to a qualified financial advisor. That's the solution.
hmm And it's interesting you say that. I have a lot of questions from that now because I'm thinking here. But first of all, I just want to know where can people find your book? Because you talked about your book and what's it called?
Yeah, so the book is called The Money Ladder,
Yes.
and you can find it pretty much in all stores on Amazon. So yeah, wherever you get your books from, you can find it. But if you go
I just
into
want to make
Google,
Yeah. I want to make
yeah,
sure you said that because it's really interesting, and I think your book can help a lot of people there. So that was one of my questions I had. So everyone, go to Amazon anywhere and get the Money Ladder.
yeah,
And then the question from what
I've
you
got a
said there.
copy of it here in case. There you go. So
Yes, Money Ladder. That's amazing. So the question I have for not the question, but the things I thought about now after you saying that is it's so interesting because it's so true. We need to have money management in the curriculum in high schools around the world because you're right. When people turn 18 and they graduate grade 12 and they go to university perhaps and they don't have the learning or the understanding of what to do when they go to the real world. They don't even know if they want to do this course or that course, and they don't
yeah,
know who they are. So how can you expect them to figure out how to pay their bills now?
yeah.
So that's a really interesting thing. So you should force that into the government. I think
I'm
that's.
working on that. Yeah,
And then the next thing is, like you said, like bro, anything with mental health, there's
mm,
causes to it, right? Like there's solutions for everything. We have this big mental health crisis.
mm,
1 in 2 people now have a mental health crisis, and actually, every 40 seconds in the world, one person commits suicide, and it's getting really bad. And that's why I'm always fighting and figuring out how can I do it. Even when I interviewed the Prime Minister last year of
mm,
Canada, why I did that was because I wanted to figure out what are we doing about the mental health crisis? What can we
yeah,
do? And so for me, getting into politics recently is all about how can we do more?
yeah,
How can we fight more? And what you're saying there is so true, because with mental health comes solutions, because everyone has mental health struggles, and the crisis with mental health, the mental health crisis,
mm,
some are from different causes.
yeah,
Most of the causes for adults are financial strain and
mm,
struggles, and unfortunately because of that they commit suicide or attempt it. And so if people were to learn the basic needs of how to handle their financial situation,
mhm,
then they wouldn't be feeling the mental health struggles that would lead to potential mental health crisis and committing suicide, unfortunately. And so, same thing with like mental health and youth. They need to figure out a way to help the teens and the young people with mental health. Different crisis, different topic, but
mm,
it's the same thing. There's a solution for everything.
mm,
And so, what you're doing, Franklin, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, you are doing so much to help people. And this is a big crisis, and you are literally helping so many individuals. You're saving lives. You probably don't get the credit you need to get. And I'm just telling you that you are helping so many people. And I'm seeing it and hearing this conversation. I'm really feeling it. So I just want to stop this for a second and say, I appreciate everything you do, because sometimes we don't always get the credit or acknowledgement for that, but you are literally saving lives. So thank you for what you do.
Oh, thank you. Well, look, I think for me, it's amazing, like I said at the start, to enable these discussions to happen. And the big thing for me really is empowering individuals themselves to be able to take the steps they need. So, my book was written in a way that I want the reader to become first person. I want the reader to be the hero of the book. It's not about me. It's about giving people the perspective so they can identify where they are, almost
Mhm.
self-diagnose where they are financially, and then be able to take the steps they need to. So, in all the conversations you have with people, whether it's politicians, business people, entrepreneurs, if we can find ways to empower people, empower others, it's not about us as a subject matter expert, it's about them. The information is no good if it's in here. We have to be able to get it out there and allow people to use it. So that's the most important thing.
And I agree with you. It's the most important thing. And I think like the job we have and the people we talk to, it's like you said, it's not about us. And it's
Yeah,
not, quite frankly, it's not about liking the politician or the person you're interviewing. It's about, okay, this person has expertise,
yeah,
and how can that person come to the world and talk to the people and say, this is what we're going to do for this crisis. And
yeah,
I, I got so much hate and death threats after my interview, but at the end of the day, it wasn't about me. It wasn't even about, right,
mm,
the politician, the person. It's about, let's just listen. Let's just
yeah,
figure out the steps we're going to take so we can solve this crisis. So, like you said,
yeah,
it's true. It's not about us. Not even about liking who we interview or liking the person we're talking to. It's about, let's talk business. Let's get
yeah.
this get things going. And so, okay, so you talked about education. We talked about
Mm,
education. And so Forbes recently stated this article where they said 50% of the Gen Zers are extremely worried about not having enough money and not being able to afford a home one day. And so that is a big fear for young people. And my question for you is, for the young people listening to this, what's your advice to them to ease their worry about not having enough money, and maybe even advice for them if they don't know what they're supposed to do in their life and how they can get to a place where, okay, I can afford a home one day and this is how I'm going to do it. Is
yeah.
it finding a job that pays a certain amount of money? Is it a mindset? Like, that's my question, is what can they do?
Yeah, I definitely sympathize with, the challenge that a lot of people have now. And it isn't even just the sort of, Gen Zs. I think, some millennials are concerned about ever being able to afford a house. If you look at the average age of first time, house owners, that number keeps going up and up and up because the cost of living crisis, inflation, interest rates, economic challenges, there's so many things that's happening to us that as a result means that the money we have in our pockets don't go as far as they once did. I guess what I would say to anyone in that stage, particularly the younger generation who are thinking about the future, is think long term because it might seem as if right now things are hard. The
Mhm.
truth is you're going to spend more time of your life being an older individual than you are as a younger individual. So the decisions you're making today, don't allow that to basically impede on the future where you're going to spend most of your time. So if that means delaying gratification now, and so rather than buying that brand new sports car as soon as you get your first job, actually
Mhm.
don't, and put that money somewhere, invest that money somewhere, give yourself a 10-year horizon, a 15-year horizon, and really make that money work for you so that when you're in your mid 30s or whenever 40s, you'll have more resources to maybe buy a better home than you could if you tried to force yourself to buy a home when you're 21 because you've got limited resources. So I would say think long term, try and delay gratification because trust me, been there, done that. You can have all the shiny toys, but sometimes, and I have this vivid, sort of anecdote. I bought a very nice car when I was in my early 20s because I was starting to earn some usable money. And then I thought, it's so expensive to insure, it's so expensive to service, it's so expensive to own this thing that I was dreaming about that I wish I didn't buy it. And so
Mhm.
sometimes you have to go through those things to realize that actually, do you know what? It isn't all that great just trying to rush to get these things now. So definitely take your time is what I would say. Think long term because you are going to spend more time in your old age than in your younger time. But also think about how you can group up with people around you. There are lots of examples of families and friends and communities who pull their resources together so that they've got greater buying power. So, if you've got a flatmate that you're both flat sharing and you're both working, you might be able to put money together and buy a house together. If you've got siblings and you're, in a big family, there's a lot of communities who do that where, everybody put their money together, they buy homes until they're able to all get a home. That's the kind of strategy they take. So if your resources are limited, I totally get it. We'd all love to earn more money tomorrow, but that's just not a reality for the majority of people. So actually, what can you do today? And for a lot of young people, it's about cutting back. It's about thinking long term. It's about thinking how you can group up to create a bigger buying power.
That's really interesting. That's smart tips there. Because it's true, people, I've done it when I was in my early 20s, is okay, I'm going to go buy a nice sports car. But then what's the point of that? You're right, it's a big insurance and big services if it breaks down. And the snowstorms, like crashing once because I'm not the best driver. So it takes a lot of work. And I think that's really smart for any young people to figure out their options.
Mm,
There's more later on in life than that nice
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
car. And so, okay, so when you have had these with the encounters with your clients who maybe struggled with mental health due to
Mm.
financial pressure, what was your approach with these conversations? Were you able to ease their anxiety and give them tips? And if so, what are some tips you would say to people who are coming to you and say, "Hey, Franklin, I have some struggles right now, whether it's struggles with I'm making too much money and people want so much out of my time, or it's hey, I'm not making enough and I'm looking like this month is going to be really challenging. What can I do because I'm having really bad anxiety right now?"
Yeah, so in the banking world or in finance in general, we are very aware of, clients who may suffer as a result of, their business, personal lives, etc. So there's actually something known as clients or customers in vulnerable situations. And that is something that all bankers and advisors are trained to identify. So when you're talking to a client and you can identify that, this individual may be vulnerable because of things like a death in the family, divorce, losing their job, change in financial circumstances. We're all trained to be able to identify that. And when we identify those things, it's about looking at, okay, what are the measures I need to put in place for this individual? How much more support do they need to make sure that I, A, fully understand what their issues and challenges and concerns are, and then maybe taking a bit more time than we usually would to make sure that we're meeting those needs properly. And sometimes that might mean referrals to other services that might be able to give them greater support. So, absolutely, it's about not trying to shoehorn every individual into one solution, but really taking the time to really understand and firstly acknowledge that perhaps we can see that there might be a change in circumstance and talking them through it to say, is this actually a concern for you? The easier thing to assume is that, if wealthy people have a lot of money, they can just kind of, pay their way out of problems. But like I said at the start, they can't. And so you could be worth billions. If you go through a divorce, that could be a crushing experience for you emotionally, just trying to go through what that means. You might be dealing with lawyers, you might be dealing with the children, and what does that mean for you? So the last thing they need is somebody just kind of not taking the time to really acknowledge that you actually may be going through something here. So rather than us rushing to invest this money, let's maybe take a bit more time to really understand if now is the right time to be doing it. Or if you need to borrow money, let's make sure that you understand the implications of it and how that might impact, the months and the years ahead. So I think it's really just about identifying if there is a change in circumstance we can see, and really taking a step back to work with them to make sure we find the right solutions.
That's really smart. I like those tips. And so, with mental health, there comes a lot of stigma and shame with mental health. And I feel like the same thing when it comes to finances. People have some
Mm.
shame about admitting their financial struggles. So, can you explain or share, some words or some encouragement for anyone who is going through some financial struggles to not have shame towards it? Because at the end of the day, if we talk about it, that's how we can, ask for help. That's how we can raise awareness that you're not alone in it. And so it's
Yeah.
the same thing with mental health, shame, guilt, and the fear. So what are some things you can say to people who maybe are hiding their struggles right now?
Yeah. Really good question. And actually, in my book, I specifically write in there that wherever you are on this journey, you are not alone. Because I've come across so many, people over my 16 years in banking, and I see so many similarities that nobody ever talks about. Because a lot of people try to keep their financial and money issues to themselves. But when I see so many of it, I'm thinking, guys, are you aware that there's so many people just like you trying to, make good in life, trying to raise a family, trying to succeed and be successful, but you've probably got the same worries as your neighbor next door. You just don't talk about it, right? So I would say you're not alone. And lots of studies show that majority of adults actually admit that they're financially illiterate. Okay, and that's actually the fact. So if you're sitting there thinking, gee, whenever I'm hearing all these changes from policies and governments and all these things, and I don't actually understand what it means, you're not alone, right? Because you have to understand if you work in a particular field of the world, you might know more about it than someone who doesn't. Not everybody works in finance, and so when all these jargon things are being thrown around, you're not expected to know. But what you can do is be intentional, be inquisitive, be curious, and start, okay, let me pick up a book and start maybe understanding some of these terminologies. Or let me, on the weekend, flick over to the economic side of that newspaper rather than just the gossip. Maybe let me spend 10 minutes just seeing what's happening on the business side. And, oh, okay, start to get familiar with it. I think you'd be surprised and amazed how much our brains can consume. And that's just from a general perspective, right? Our brains are amazing things that can really expand. And so even if you think you're not an expert in money or finance, you'll be surprised how more familiar you become with it if you start taking the time to read literature, read books, read articles, listen to a bit about the business. You might not care, like we said, don't always be distracted by the messenger. Focus on the message. So even if we don't like who somebody is, focus on what they're saying and how that might impact you. I think if we all did a bit of that every day, incremental changes, we will feel a lot more confident when we start talking about money and when we start operating with it.
It's so true because people don't listen. They just see, oh, like they see on Instagram or online, they start having this judgment because their friends tell them to believe in a certain thing. But then it's like, well, if you just listen, you'll realize that whatever that person, that policy, or that thing is that new policy, that new bill, whatever it is, if we're talking policies or government here, is going to help you in your life, and maybe that's not going to help your friends in his life. So everyone has to have their own opinions and their own a mindset and listen and learn. That's one thing I'm learning too is people listen to their friends. And so even a family member recently was like, well, trying to tell me something and about government in Canada. And I said that that's not true. That's not right. You just need to go learn the articles, read about it, and you'll learn like really. And so I get these fights with people because I'm always very passive and I'm aggressive. And when I believe in something,
Yeah.
I believe in it. And I agree with you though. People need to learn and to read and to educate themselves before they make opinions.
Absolutely. Just take the time to do it, and it's not as overwhelming as you might think it is. And that's why things like my book, and there are many other books, but you'd be surprised how much you can find and resonate with once you start taking the time. You have to be deliberate about it. That's one thing for sure. It's not just going to come to you. So, like anything in life, if you want to make change, you have to take the first step. It just won't happen otherwise.
Those are words of wisdom. If you want to make changes, you need to take the first step. I really like that. And so people I always hear people talking about different income streams. Some people
Mm.
have like 10 different jobs or 10 different incomes, 10 different business ideas that they have. And they're like, well, I'm going to be rich because I'm going to open 10 different businesses. One could be a restaurant, one could be an online
Yeah.
Etsy shop, one can be, I'll do a book, I'll do this, I'll do that. Or is it better to have one venture, one income stream, one career, focusing on one thing and making that one thing blow up? I mean, I
Yeah.
don't, what's your thoughts on that?
A very interesting question. So this is something I talk about a lot actually, because becoming self-made is now probably the most commonly talked about topic, right? And I
Mhm.
think social media has enabled that because now you can see everybody showing off how successful they are doing 101 different things. The truth is, you can be very successful and very fulfilled doing one thing, right?
Mhm.
Or you can be very successful and very fulfilled doing two things. It really all comes down to you, your execution, your ability to make something work. But doesn't mean that one or the other is better or one or the other is wrong. And so I always make that really clear to people that just because you want to do two things doesn't mean you're going to be more successful than a person doing one thing. And just because you do one thing doesn't mean you'll be more successful than somebody who does two. It really comes down to you individually. This is why I want people to really self-diagnose. Have you got the attention span, the ability, the time, the flexibility to be able to multitask and do various things at once? Because if you don't, that's okay. I don't want people thinking that you must have side hustles to be successful. That's not true. There are a lot of people with one job, employed, that earn millions a year. Okay. Now, okay, I understand that usually those are those who are slightly higher up the hierarchy, but they exist. There are many people I work with, for example, who have a one-day job, make very good money, can have a
Mhm.
good level of lifestyle, and they actually see everyone else running around with side hustles, thinking, "God, what are they doing? They're so dysfunctional. Why don't they just focus on one thing?" But the reason why I think it's so popular is because people are now looking for control on their own careers and more security than some jobs can offer. Because I think if you look at, the world over the last 10, 15 years, there's so many sort of economic challenges that are coming about. Every day you read about a big corporate cutting, thousands of jobs here and there. So people now no longer want to be at the mercy of one individual employer because they know that times are tough, times are tricky, and they can decide to let go of them at any point. So people are trying to figure out, well, how do I build my own thing? The truth is, not everybody has the minerals to build their own thing. Some people are just great at working for other people, whereas some
Mhm.
people just can't be put in a box where they work for anybody, that they have to do their own thing. So you have to really self-diagnose what type of person you are, because I would rather you did fewer things and did them well than try to have 100 streams of income and do them poorly. Because just because you try that doesn't mean you're actually going to make any money out of those things. So quality over quantity.
I like that, and it's true because sometimes people are not good multitaskers, like
Yep.
me. I can't multitask well. Can't even like if I'm doing something and then someone's talking to me, and then I have emails to do, and I
Yeah.
just can't do it. So that's why that 10 different things does not work for me.
Yeah.
And so okay, so people we talk about common issues people face One common issue people face is the constant fear of finances. We talked about the shame earlier.
Mm,
Even if they weren't fully aware what they're doing wrong, some people have fear of not being able to afford a certain amount of money. And so, what tools or resources would you recommend to people who are just starting their financial journey and
yep.
need a foundation to build on? And they might have that fear of, okay, like I'm just starting off. Maybe they're young, maybe they're not, maybe
Mm.
they're older, but they're starting a new career path and they have a fear and they don't know what to do or resources. Should they come to someone like you for banking information or finances? Like, what do they do?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing I would say is, read a copy of The Money Ladder. That's a great
Mm-hmm.
place to start if you want if you want a great solid foundation. But even within it, so just to kind of describe what I would recommend to people in that scenario, at the start of the book, I ask the readers to set three goals that they want to achieve in the next sort of 10 years, and also rank those goals based on how important it is to them, but also how much money they need to achieve those goals. Because what you tend to find is the more expensive a goal is, the further it goes in terms of timeline, right? So if a goal of mine is going to cost me $100, I'll probably have that sooner than a goal that's going to cost me $100,000 because I know I need to take time to make the money to get that goal. But having clarity of what you're trying to achieve is so important as a start. So even if you're young, if you're a teenager, early 20s, whatever, ask yourself, what do I want to achieve in the next 5 years? Is it buying a home? Is it owning a car? Is it, being getting married? What is it? And once you know what that goal is, right, let's work backwards. What is it going to take for me to get to that goal? And that's why in the book, it's, in the very first chapter, I asked the reader to set those goals so that everything you're about to read will help you to try and solidify what it's going to take for you to get back to those goals. So once you know what you're trying to achieve, what the timeline is, what it's going to cost you, then you come to that important question of, okay, what do I now need to do to afford these goals? How much
Mm-hmm.
harder do I need to work? And sometimes it's not just about you physically, but how much harder does your money need to work? And so the simple principles of a lot of people invest money because they want their money to grow for them over time for a point in time in the future where they need the money. And because of, and I won't bore you with the details around inflation and interest rates and things like that, but essentially, if you leave your money in a bank account or under your pillow, as some people like to do, your money doesn't grow, and inflation and cost of living will erode the buying power of that money. So you need to put your money somewhere that is working to increase over time, so that when you are ready to get married, when you are ready to buy a house, when you are ready to do that thing, that the money you've put aside has the same buying power as the value of what you need it to do for you. So understanding those principles kind of gets your mindset into a place where you're like, okay, I know what I want, I know what I need, what it's going to take, and here are the steps I need to start following to get there. So then you think, where do I put my money? Is it stocks and shares? Do I put it into gold? Do I put it into, all those things is probably the end solution as opposed to the start, because the vehicles of where you put your money is more a consequence of what you're trying to achieve with it. And so if you understand what you're trying to do, where you're trying to go, that's more important. For a young person who's trying to really start out, I think that's a good place to start. Have a goal, understand what it's going to take for you to get that goal, and work your way backwards.
That's really interesting. And also knowing that the new year starting really soon, right? New year and goal setting is important. And I think that's
Yep.
really important. Everyone should make their time to make goals. Like, what do they want to do? Who do they want to be?
Yep.
What is it? And I think that's important. Especially even me, I find my team made me do goal settings of what we want to achieve in 2025, and I think that's so important. Where do I want to go? What do I want to do? And those are really important goals. But of course, if anyone is struggling financially, they need to go and grab the Money Ladder because that's a book that will really help them, get started on their journey of financial literacy and really figuring out what to do with their money,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely, absolutely. That's a good start. There are others available, but I think it's really when you're thinking about setting new goals, as you say, money isn't everything, but it does offer you that security, which gives you the freedom to then think about other things. So it's a very important pillar in terms of how you set yourself up in life.
I agree. And so finally, before we end this, we'll have two questions left. And
Okay.
first, the question I have is, can you offer any, if can you talk probably now? If you can offer one piece of advice to someone who feels their finances are controlling their mental health, what advice would you give to them? I know we talked a lot about it, but anyone listening to this right now, if they're going through any struggles, whether it's actually finances or mental health, what are words you can say to them right now to encourage them that they're not alone?
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, I understand how difficult it can be when you've got financial worries. What I would say is definitely understand that money isn't you. Money is something else, and you are you, right? So, in the absence of needing money to go to work, to put food on the table, to get in a car, etc., there is you that exists here. So, if you can subtract the two and identify that you and money aren't this one thing, but actually you are separate, you can
Mhm.
understand that, okay, the challenge you've got at the moment might be that this thing here isn't in the best shape possible, but you here can still find a way to exist and be without you thinking that the two are intertwined, because then that means every time money worries come, this thing goes down. But really understand how to exist and be without this thing. So now that you understand that the two are separate, focus on, right, what is the problem in this arena that's causing me issues here? Am I spending too much? Do I need to budget better? Do I need to, find ways to earn more income? Or do I just need to go talk to an expert to help me put it all together? You can really systemize this thing without it feeling like it's just one big bubble that, kind of all exist all together. I really want people to understand and learn how to extract the two so they don't see it as being this one thing that just coexists. And if you can do that, you can then go and really seek help and say, look, right, I've got credit card debt. I need a plan to understand how I can reduce this and really tackle it objectively so that when you're acting out of line and out of a way that doesn't actually help you achieve your goal, you can check yourself and be like, right, hang on, I know that the steps I need to take to improve this thing requires me to behave differently. Whereas sometimes when it's all intertwined, you're not checking yourself in your behavior. Oh, I'm going to buy myself some more coffee because actually it makes me feel better. When actually, if your budget for that month says you've overspent on coffees, stop,
Mhm.
no more coffee. So you have to be disciplined in this. But yeah, I'm sorry to say, Brittany, no more coffees. If you've already hit your marker for the month, you have to be able to know how to separate the two. But that is those sort of basic principles that can magnify an issue or solve an issue. So really being disciplined and extracting the two and knowing what you need to do to tackle the money problems individually.
Mhm. No more coffee for I guess people. That's what I heard from that. But you know what? That was really good advice, and I really believe that someone out there needs to hear this conversation because you're right. People need a budget and need to figure out their two right. Their
Mm.
finances are so separate to who they are as a
Yeah.
person, individual. And so, if anyone listening to this, where can they find you? Where can they find Franklin?
So they can find me on Instagram, Urban Financier. They can find me on LinkedIn, Franklin Asante. They've got my website, urbanfinancier.co.uk, or the Money Ladder. If you put that into Google, that will come up as well.
Okay, amazing. Everyone, go check him out because honestly, Franklin, I'm so grateful that you're having this conversation with me on your Saturday afternoon. And so it's what you're doing. I just want to say what you're doing is really a blessing. You're helping so many lives. I know I said it before, but I really mean it. You're helping people and you're solving issues and you're helping them in their lives. And the job you do, like I said before, doesn't always get the credit that we need, or maybe you don't need the credit, but I just want to let you know that you're saving lives every time you make a post and you write a book or you write something and you give advice to someone who is struggling, you are making a difference. So I'm really honored that I got to meet you today, and that my goal, my prayers is that we were able to help someone in need. And for anyone listening to this, if you're going through financial stress or you're going through any mental health stress, I think it's important to let them know that there's resources out there, there's help available, there's hotlines, there's people that will help them with their mental health struggles, and of course, there's people who help them with their financial stress. And so, before we end this, I just want to say that, and I want to thank you again so much for chatting with me today and talking to me and sharing so many amazing insights and tips with everyone.
No, thank you so much for having me. And I guess my message to everyone who's listening is that you're not alone. There is help out there. Your money isn't you. You exist separately. And so if there's any problems, just learn how to get the right help and support to deal with that so that it doesn't impact this, because you are far more important than the money. So just make sure that you can both coexist happily, but seek support, and let's help each other.
was so beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.